It's such a pleasure to be joining you right here on the India Development Debate this evening on ET Now. I'm Supriya Shrinate. Charged mobility is the way forward. That is the message from Prime Minister Narendra Modi as India prepares for a big switch to electric vehicles. Addressing the Global Mobility Summit MOVE, as it's being called in New Delhi today, the Prime Minister pitched for higher investments in electric vehicles and smart charging facilities to ensure the transition is smooth, and CEOs of automobile companies are listening. Suzuki, the country's largest car maker, says it will soon test at least 50 prototypes of electric vehicles to establish a lead in the EV space. It's, however, not going to be all that easy. Speaking to ET Now on the sidelines of the summit, M&M Chairman Anand Mahindra said that the country has a lot of ground to cover in terms of both infrastructure as well as affordability. For India, the switchover to green wheels is critical, as it will help reduce the oil import bill and emission of greenhouse gases, especially in big cities like Mumbai and New Delhi, which are absolutely choking. You know, the kind of deaths that happen due to air pollution, appalling. The big push to EVs is a big topic of discussion right here on the India Development Debate this evening. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining in. A quick update on our wonderful panel right here. I've been joined by Mr. Chetan Maini, Mr. Deepak Gupta, Harma Sarabji, and of course, I also have Mr. Mahesh Babu. Thank you very, very much, gentlemen, for being with us. And Mr. Mahesh Babu, if I may begin with you, India has vowed to move towards green mobility, setting 2030 deadline. It's a steep target for India to meet, given that electric vehicles constitute just less than 1% of our total vehicles. In fact, 2.3 lakh electric vehicles were sold in fiscal year 17, and that was it. Are we on course to achieving that ambitious target that we set out to achieve? Are there enough levers in place?
I think one of the important thing what's happening today is towards it. MOVE is a summit which has been conveyed by Niti Aayog and the Government of India, and none other than the Prime Minister himself has come and talked about mobility. This is the first time a Prime Minister of India is talking about like industry, not just the automobile, but mobility as a solution. So if you look at what has been done till now and what is the target set towards both industry, government and also the stakeholders, I think we are in the right direction to set up what India has to do in sustainable mobility.
Okay, all right. Let me just quickly take this across to Harma Sarabji, who joins us, and in fact, let me just take this out to Deepak Gupta. Shifting to EV by 2030, Mr. Gupta, will undoubtedly be beneficial. I mean, some back of the envelope calculations suggest that we may actually result in saving about 3.9 lakh crore on petrol and diesel consumptions, with very obvious implications on both the fisc and the current account deficit. The question, though, is that is there enough ecosystem to make it possible without government support?
No, I am of the view that the target of 2030 is more a statement of intent to give direction to policy makers that that is the way we have to move. It will not be possible to have all EV vehicles by 2030. I think what our target should be is to have public transportation of all kinds, definitely EV by that date, and we can proceed with the four-wheelers, that is cars, which currently seems to be the global focus, a little slowly. And also as far as two-wheelers are concerned, in the next 5 years with massive accelerated kind of investment and policy making, I am sure we can develop the ecosystem to make this possible.
Hold that thought there, because I'm going to get Harma Sarabji to react to a point that I've been wanting to raise on this show. And, you know, we first had all vehicles by 2030 electrical. Obviously, we don't have an entire ecosystem that's going to make it possible. We're now being told another dateline, another target. Harmas, is this a case of a shifting goalpost as well? Okay, there seems to be a problem with Harmas's line. We'll go back to him in just a minute. But before I go any further, let me ask Chetan Maini, who's joining us on the show. There was wide expectation that FAME 2 would announce fiscal incentives to make green mobility a reality. Are you disappointed that no SOPs were eventually announced today by the Prime Minister?
No, I am of the view that the target of 2030 is more a statement of intent to give direction to policy makers that that is the way we have to move. It will not be possible to have all EV vehicles by 2030. I think what our target should be is to have public transportation of all kinds, definitely EV by that date, and we can proceed with the Not really. I think what was very important is to send a larger message of a vision and a direction. And what we heard coming from the Prime Minister's side is that how important mobility is for the country, how important, and he's setting a direction of what parts of mobility is important. That two-wheelers, three-wheelers, buses, shared connected transportation is absolutely critical. And I think just setting the context of what the nation should be doing is probably a very important milestone. I'm sure the FAME policy will come out in a week here or there is not going to make a huge difference. But to get all the thought leaders together and to get a direction from the Prime Minister in an area of what's key to the country is a very, very positive step today.
Okay, the positive step is that at least at the highest level of the government and policy making, electric vehicles are being spoken about. The positive thing also is that at least all of you like-minded people, innovators, manufacturers are all in the same room talking about this. I don't think Hormaz is still with us. Is he with us? Can I go to Hormaz? Okay. Let me just go across to Mr. Gupta then, because I will take a follow-up question with Mr. Babu. 794 crore, Mr. Gupta, was given for tech platform, for demand incentives, charging infrastructure in fiscal year 16 and 17. So there is some amount of incentivization that's happening. You know, perhaps there is sincerity, maybe not enough funds. But speaking about that, don't states need to shoulder some part of this responsibility as well? Should it just be a center government initiative at all? Because whether it's charging stations, whether it's infrastructure, some of this will have to come up at the state level. You know, when you're devolving about 42% of all taxes to the states, you expect them to also come ahead and shoulder some part of this responsibility, do you not?
I entirely agree. As I said, you know, take for example, India has 30,000 urban buses. Beijing has 24,000, London has equivalent of 16,000 buses. We need 3 lakh buses in different states. And therefore, states can participate and become partners, and our incentives should be to encourage this kind of manufacturing and usage of buses. It is possible to do at a lower cost. If I have many four-wheelers with a charging infrastructure which is random in nature and expensive, then there could be problems of funds. But for buses and swapping infrastructure in bus depots with the low-cost buses which are without batteries, I think we can work out a system where a large number of buses which will help reduce costs and build up the ecosystem for manufacturing also. It's possible, and it has to be a partnership between center and states.
Hormaz, you were here with us. We were talking about this whole ambitious target of all electric vehicles by 2030. Now there is some amount of reality that's sinking in. Perhaps not going to be possible. We're talking about another year, maybe fewer cars. Is this a case of shifting goalpost?
Well, to be honest, I think, you know, the EV thing is really the flavor of the month, and sometimes I think we're getting a bit too carried away, really away from reality. While it definitely is great that, you know, everyone wants clean air and towards a low carbon future, which is the way. I just think, you know, just practically, I just don't see this happening given the current state of infrastructure. And there's a lot of talk right now. But to be honest, my concern really is the end consumer, because he eventually has to buy these vehicles. And, you know, people are talking about even 30% of the vehicle park, which goes into millions of vehicles. I have not seen any sign of of consumers even showing a taste of you know, getting into EVs. And Mahesh will know that. I mean, he's been soldiering on with the E2O, really very, very small sales. We've had some experience with the ESL tenders. Again, from what we've heard, the range is an issue. So it's really not so easy to just think that, you know, even by putting all this in place, you know, EVs people are just going to flock to EVs. I think there has to be a step-by-step approach. For me, obviously, 2- and 3-wheelers and fleet and, you know, and let's say captive fleets are the way forward. But for me, I just cannot figure out why a stepping stone like hybrids, which have really kind of given a taste of what EVs are like, they would have kind of fueled the charging infrastructures, completely bypassed. We've even forgotten completely about BS6, which is something fantastic the industry is going to achieve in 2020. And, we're talking about 2030 before that.
No, you're right. You're right. There are many intermediary steps that we must take, and why have we forgotten about that? Hormaz, that's an important point that you talk about. And I will go back to talking about the coexistence of all of that with electric vehicles in just a bit. But, the flavor also was that the Prime Minister was expected to make this grand announcement. He did not make. Mahesh Babu, without the government's support and fiscal incentives, is the move to green mobility possible at all? Can the industry make it a self-sustaining proposition without the SOPs? Because what kind of incentives will make it possible as far as the government is concerned? None of the big ones have been announced contrary to expectation.
See, the support needed for electric vehicle is just not the FAME alone, while it plays a vital role. So we are as an industry expecting the FAME 2 announcement, but we were not expecting it to come in this MOVE summit. Because the FAME 1 ends by end of September, and as long as it comes before 1st of October, it would be fine. I was told that the FAME 2 is shaping up well, and soon we will have an announcement on FAME 2 to the expectation of the industry.
Chetan, what's your own take on this? Do you believe going forward without the government's SOPs or fiscal incentives, this one's going to be tough? I mean, you're talking about a tectonic shift as far as Indian automobiles is concerned. Changing from one kind of automobiles to an entirely another kind.
Yeah, I think that if I look at the shared market and I look at two-wheelers, three-wheelers and buses, I think it's very viable, very possible. By separating batteries away from vehicles, you can get two-wheelers, three-wheelers and almost all forms of transportation today to be cost neutral, to gasoline equivalent. And with the cost of energy we have today and the renewable energy pricing dropping in the future, with battery amortization and the cost of energy, we can actually be cheaper than gasoline. So on one side, we could get product that could be lower cost or equivalent. We could get energy costs that would be cheaper. And by swapping around batteries, you can get, the refueling time, which is normally an hour to 5 hours for regular fast charging, down to a couple of minutes, which again is faster than refueling. Now, would that work for a personal mobility vehicle doing 40 kilometers per day or probably going 400 kilometers out of town? Maybe not. But would that work well for a shared mobility, a person who's driving an e-rickshaw or an auto or a taxi or a bus or a bike? It makes a lot of sense. I mean, our cities today, around 40+% of people go in buses and another 45% go in two and three wheelers. So 85% of our population being translated in two and three wheelers and buses, we need solutions that are centric towards that. Cars will come. And it's an important part of the equation, but the focus should be an area where we can make business sense today, and I don't think that those areas today need a whole lot of subsidy. What they do need is awareness. They need demand creation. Recently, for example, Karnataka announced that they would give 5,000 permits for e-autos, and that's going to create people to invest in them and look at infrastructure that comes to support it. And put that together. So there could be other forms of demand creation by the government that could probably kickstart the process on this area.
Right. Just hold that thought now, because I've got Hormaz Sarabji right here in the studios with me. And Hormaz, whether it was Mr. Gupta or Chetan, they all seem to be suggesting here that it is a good idea to perhaps, and a realistic one, to at least focus on electric two and three wheelers instead of just going after cars. You spoke about an important topic that I'm going to come to next, which is the coexistence of hybrids, and we've just moved to BS6 and all of that. But do you believe, to begin with, the drive needs to focus on two and three wheelers and not so much on cars? It's going to be extremely groundbreaking to talk about an entire shift to cars as well.
Absolutely, because I think, as Chetan said, 2 and 3 wheelers are the low-hanging fruit. They're very easy to electrify. The distances are short. People don't travel that much, so that's really a big advantage. Again, buses, definitely they should be electrified. Cabs, taxis, everything that kind of runs in a very structured or a finite way, I think easily can be electrified. But I think when you look at that freedom of mobility and personal mobility, and for private cars it becomes a completely different ball game. And I think over there sometimes we are getting ahead of ourselves. As I said, there are a lot of good technologies which can coexist. And as I said, you know, I think this whole jump to BS6 unfortunately has just been forgotten about. There's been a huge amount of investment in that, and I don't even think the industry has got a pat on the back for, let's say, moving to BS6 in absolutely record time. So, you know, we've got all these green warriors talking about EVs. They don't sell any of them at all. We don't see them on the roads. But right now, I think we need to focus also on the present, and that is we are moving to a emission regulation which is far, far better than what we've ever had. And I think that's also one of the transitions. And I think the IC engine has a huge role to play, whether it's in terms of range extenders, whether in terms of supporting hybrids for EVs. And I think that's not been given its due right now. It's just been this total jump towards EVs. Everyone's just obsessed with what's coming out of the tailpipe. Also, the implications EVs would have on something else. I mean, you know, to go to zero tailpipe emission, you could have an environmental impact elsewhere. I mean, for me, a classic case is making light cars out of, let's say, aluminum, which is great for, let's say, good efficiency. But the energy required to produce aluminum is huge. So again, I think this whole well-to-wheel impact of CO2 has to be taken into account as opposed to just tank-to-wheel.
Because I think I also need to talk about the greater infrastructure of this green mobility that we are speaking about. And Mr. Gupta, coming to you, because you've been in the bureaucracy, you've dealt with something like this. One of the biggest challenges in embracing mobility will be the cost of batteries. I think Chetan and Mahesh both referred to this initially. Without being an economical option, it's never going to take off. The prices have come down for lithium batteries, I think from $600 in 2012 to about $250 in 2017, expected to go down further. But what will it take for us to bring down these costs? Because without this, it's never going to take off. I mean, what is going to enable these batteries to perhaps be made here in India? Mr. Gupta?
But just before that, may I make one small comment about the electric cars, four-wheelers. You see, one of the biggest challenges today is the urban congestion, which is completely going to go out of hand soon. And electric cars are not going to solve the problem of congestion. Therefore, we have to make an ecosystem where people shift from cars and two-wheelers to buses and public transport. About the batteries, this is an essential part of the EV movement. We missed the bus for making solar cells in India. It is a complex subject, and it has to be deliberated how we prepare ourselves to indigenize and manufacture batteries, and in fact not only batteries but all the other systems. This is a great opportunity for Make in India, in fact a great opportunity for future exports. We have to work out how to manufacture batteries in India. I don't have any ready answers just now, but this is something which needs to be suitably incentivized also, and volumes will make a difference.
No, volumes will also make a difference to charging, won't it? I mean, Mahesh, if I may ask you this question, the question continues to be, okay, one is on cost, but the other is on what sort of charging infrastructure will work for a market as unique as India. We can't port models from the best because that is not what our population is like. You know, setting up a pole where there could be a charging point and you can go plug in, charge there is not a model that's going to be very easy to work here in India. What's your take on that, Mahesh?
So if you look at charging infrastructure, I think world over it is proved that for a normal personal use, home charging or a simple normal charging is sufficient for a run of a vehicle, what we do in a city. But if you look at specific segments like fleet, then you need a fast charging, because you need to run more the vehicle every day, because it will be shared by many people like Ola's, Uber, Zoom and other fleet mobility operators. Then we need a fast charging. I think with the shared mobility and public focus, I think all these routes are fixed and known, and hence it is important and vital to bring in charging infrastructure to have EV adoption soon.
You know, I'm impressed that you talk about shared mobility, but Chetan, there is also a complete lack of protocol which doesn't allow a private player to come in easily. You've got to need a pan-India license from a distribution, power distribution company and all of that. The lack of protocol and the difficulty with which a private player can come in to put up these charging points is a concern in itself, is it not?
For charging, it used to be because there was some unclear policies on it, but the government has clarified that that is not an issue anymore. You don't need any of these permits. In the case of battery swapping that we look at, the infrastructure is you're doing battery as a service, so it's not that you're selling energy, you're selling an entire service. And in case of battery swapping, because you have very small infrastructure that can cater to maybe 200 odd vehicles in a day, you're pretty much using 1/100th the real estate space of probably what you would use for a regular fast charging infrastructure. So in cities where we need infrastructure deployed very quickly and very economically, especially for the shared market, swapping would play a very large role, and there are no real government challenges around it. A lot of the industry players are coming together to say what sizes of batteries should be used, what applications, and there are pseudo standards being created within the industry to try and see how best we can address the consumer's pain point, which is, can he get a product that is actually more cost effective, more convenient, and faster refueling. I think that's the key. If we, Hormuz also led to the fact that unless we're able to give consumers the right level of performance in that segment that they are in, transformation is more difficult. It's easy today. It can be done in the shared market, and so I think there's a very important area that can be focused with infrastructure solutions that could be very India-centric. We don't need policy interventions on this area, but probably a part of the industry coming together and implementing it.
Mr. Gupta, I need to move away just from the charging and the the waste management, the recycling and the battery prices to talk about the human element involved into this entire process. Now, this shift is going to entail perhaps new skill sets that are going to be required. It will perhaps make a lot of the existing workforce redundant, from auto component industry to pump hands and retail fuel outlets. What will these job losses entail, and how do you ensure that they can be retrained, repurposed? Isn't that something that also needs to be a part of the policy initiative? Can we talk about electric vehicles by 2030 without deliberating on the human cost involved?
I agree with you entirely. This is an important area because in one side there might be substantial job losses. On the other side, there might be substantial job gains, and therefore this subject must be gone into depth. It is not considered important now because we are barely starting, but as we intensify, this will become an issue. So we need to study this and find out which jobs will be lost, how retraining can be done. I entirely agree with you, and discussion on this and how to do it must start forthwith.
Indeed. Mahesh, very quickly, I'm running out of time here on the show, but I want to take a question with you and then have a last word with Hormaz. And the question has to be, can India write off combustion engines? Will petrol and diesel be written off completely, or will all of this actually coexist? And the discussion needs to perhaps be more around cleaner energy than just electric vehicles.
I think this is a question every time we have to answer, that even if you take a best scenario of 30 to 40% penetration by 2030 to 2040 EVs, the remaining 60 to 70% is going to be on fossil fuel vehicle. There are tremendous improvements coming on these vehicles, and it will coexist both. Because the use cases of electric vehicle right now seems to be within the cities, and if you want to do inter-cities, then there has to be a different kind of methodology needs for commuting, and that's now being met by fossil fuels. There are huge improvements happening in fossil fuels to reduce emissions, improve efficiency, and so on. So both will coexist for a pretty long time. Only thing is the growth in the total sector we believe the most of it will be taken by sustainable mobility solutions, while still there will be a growth for the regular petrol and diesel cars.
Harmas, we'll let you have our last word on the show then. And you started off on a good note by saying that we need to find a balance between clean energy, green energy, hybrids. The move to BS6 can't be ignored completely. But if the government were to make this shift to all electric by 2030, for a country like India, given the changes that it needs, do we need to progress gradually, or has the time come to make it binding, like a lot of people suggest there? A time frame where, like the time frame that was set by the courts as far as Bharat 6 was concerned, or the NGT banning diesel vehicles in Delhi within a stipulated time. Do you believe it's that time frame that will make it happen, or do you believe the shift can actually be gradual, given our own realities and how much time we really take to change?
Well, I'm skeptical about how fast it can happen, because clearly, I think fundamentally our market is a very cost sensitive, a very low cost market. And right now EVs are expensive. They're anti-Aam Aadmi, to be honest, in a certain way, because they just cost too much. Of course, the prices will come down. But I think the strategy really should be, or the policy should be, we should be looking at a low carbon or a carbon free energy scenario. And there are many ways to achieve that. So I think there's no real clear winner here in terms of tech as yet. I'm sure eventually it will have to be electric. But I think the path we go there has to be a kind of left it open to manufacturers to figure out, because that's what will drive innovation in different technologies. So I think that's what needs to be done. Obviously, EVs will come, but as I said, I'm just a little skeptical about how fast, because we've seen now EVs in our country. In fact, Chetan, I remember doing a cover story with you over 10 years back on your Riva. And to be honest, nothing has happened since. Chetan was one of the first movers on EVs, but nothing has happened for various reasons, because whether it's infrastructure, the demand is not there. And here we are talking about really pushing it. But at the end of the day, I look at it from the consumer's point of view, and I just don't think he will get the bang for that buck in the near foreseeable future with an EV. So I think we've got to be looking at other alternatives in this part towards going all EV one day eventually. But I think, it has to be a lot more measured and a lot more holistic.
Pragmatic approach to this entire thing. Obviously, we want a cleaner environment and we would want to invest in green mobility, but it can't happen at the click of a button. It's going to be gradual. The industry has put in many reforms in place, whether it's switching to Bharat 6 or complying with many of the Supreme Court and NGT orders. And all of that can't be wished away as well. The consumer, remember, at the end of the day, is going to be king. He needs to make that choice. Of course, that has to be environmentally friendly, but the choice must rest with the consumer. On that note, thank you very, very much, Chetan Maini, Mahesh Babu, Mr. Deepak Gupta, and of course, Harmas Sarabji for being with us in this very special edition as we discuss, debate, and arrive at solutions on mobility.